Hi everyone, welcome. I am Kim Beegler, the owner of Ewethful Fiber Mill, and I am sitting here at the wool mill in Halsey, Oregon, and it's been a bit. So if you are new to me, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. I'm going to talk a bit about processing wool, Targhee wool to be exact, and just catch up a little bit on what I've been spinning, knitting, all of those things. So if you're returning, welcome back. Welcome back and thank you. Wish is about to try to get onto my lap. She is the mill cat and she loves to be a part of everything. Okay, so it's been a while. It's been a while, right? I think it's been about a month, and I have got, in this episode, I'm going to talk about Targhee, like I mentioned. That was the Fiber Club subscription club. That was their fiber of the month. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that because I've just been fine wooling it up and I'm ready for a fine wool break. And then I've been doing a little spinning and a little bit of knitting, actually a lot of spinning, some knitting, and some gardening, all of those things. So let's get started, shall we, before I forget and go on. I'm on here a little bit less. You may have noticed it's been a while, and it's just because I am just slowing down a little bit. I'm slowing down and I've got to take a little bit more time at home, and harvest season is about to start. And so things just are shifting and it's time for me to reprioritize a bit. And that's where I've been. So I am on Patreon a lot more. So I have a Ewethful has a community there. We, right now we're doing a little spin along where we're trying to get out of our default yarn. So if you're a hand spinner and you're used to spinning that weight and that's just where you fall and it's kind of hard to get out of that weight, whether you're wanting to go thicker or thinner, this is a great time to join the community because I just did a Zoom. The recording is in there, and it'll give you some tips, and we'll be meeting up a couple times over the next month to see where everybody's at. So, and we've already had some great results. While we were in the Zoom, 2 people were like, oh my gosh, amazing. I'm spinning a different weight yarn. So there's also, you get fiber alerts, first ones to get fiber alerts. We've got social meetups. There's just fun stuff. And there's a lot more of the videos that I was putting on the socials and on YouTube are ending up over there because I just can't be all the places. And that's a place to be. So check out, there's a link in the show notes. And if you are listening to the podcast only version, I will probably be doing a little bit, I'll be a little more heavy on the audio podcasts than here on YouTube. So if you are wanting to hear a little bit more about what's going on the farm, in my making life, then head to the podcast and you might get some more things there. And I've added a new for listeners. There is now in the show notes a spot you can go, and there's a Google form. You can click a link and you can actually communicate with me. It's very hard to do on audio podcasts. So there's a form you can like ask a question, things like that, and then I can actually get them, because podcasting is audio only. It's kind of like you're in the netherworld out there. You know some people are downloading it, but you don't know who, and there's no real great way to communicate. So there's our train. Anyway, if you are listening, you can go to the show notes and get that. Okay, onward. So I'm finishing something. Sylvia, if you are watching, this is done. And this is the Diaemus by Lisa Mutch. I started this, I'm gonna say 4 to 5 years ago, and it kept getting put away. You will see when I take it off why it kept getting put away. And is it perfect? No, I'm gonna take my microphone off because I'm actually getting warm in this. It is absolutely beautiful. I knit it with yarns that a friend Lisa gave me from a travel she was on, and a friend Sandy gave me. So it has lots of sentimental value. And it is beautiful, but I will show you. And I didn't even finish. I ran out of yarn, so I stopped early, and I did not block this to its fullest extent. It could be much larger, but here she goes. Ready? There's a starting point. And then she goes on. It's absolutely stunning. I love how it turned out. I love the colors. It was fun to knit. There was nothing, it just was big, and it's not a project that I'd probably do again but you can see how we're still going. I think there's a mistake there, but you know what? And we're still going. And it's got all these lovely angles to it. it really was, it was a cool knit. Just for me, part of it was that this is a fingering weight yarn, which I don't work with a lot, and it was more on the superwash end, which I don't work with a lot. So it just was more challenging. It's more slippery than what I'm used to working with. I'm pretty sure I did it on bamboo needles because there was no way. But this beauty, she is beautiful. I'm gonna wear the heck out of her when the right season comes. But she's done. It took me forever to finish it. Then it took me forever to weave in the ends. And then it took me forever to block it. And I actually just ended up blocking it by hanging it on a drying rack because I didn't want it to be big. I mean, I can wrap this thing like 4 times. So that was big enough. So it's done. Sylvia, thank you for continuing to bring it up so that I would continue to pick it up. Okay, so there's a finished project there. Knitting, I'm working on a vest I talked about a month ago. I got about 6 inches in, and then I tried it on and was like, it's way too big. So I ripped the whole thing out, and I've started over, and I'm just on the back ribbing band. So I didn't even bring it because I think I was probably beyond that when you saw it the last time. I can't remember, but next time I'm on, I'll show you. Okay, spinning. I'm also working on a Shetland lace shawl, or a Shetland lace scarf designed by Elizabeth Williamson from a class I took. She is a Shetlander, and I'm using handspun in it. I meant to bring it and I forgot, but it's just different Shetland lace patterns in little blocks that you do, and they get significantly more difficult as far as the lace work goes in each block. And I'm on the most difficult part, and I spent the last, I just sit down and do a couple rows here and there, and I'm kind of a little more focused right now, and I need to stay focused because I'm on the most difficult section of switching up lace pattern, and I just need to stay in the flow because I have ripped out so many times over the past week. So anyway, I don't have a lot on the needles. I'm trying to stay pretty focused. We're going on a trip next week, and so I will have that knitting with me and hopefully plow through a lot of my vest. I have been doing a lot of spinning, so let me show you. Look at this. And this is partially what inspired doing a bit of a spin along over on Patreon. And it's a spin along at your own pace, but it's more about learning what your wheel is capable of and sometimes not capable of, and how to make those adjustments so you don't have to make adjustments to how you're spinning per se. So this is turning out to be about an Aran weight yarn, which is way outside my norm. My norm is like a 2-ply DK-ish weight. This is a 2-ply, but it is an Aran weight. So I made adjustments to my wheel via the tension in the drive band to get to this big, fluffy, heavier yarn. So that's what we're talking about. Anyway, if you're interested, pop over, get some details. You can start in my Patreon community for just $5. So very inexpensive. There's different levels. If you're at the $20 level, you're getting fiber in the mail sometimes, and they have some coming because I just did a special blend and I'm very excited about it. Okay, so this is South Country Cheviot. It is from the fleece I bought last year about this time at Maryland Sheep and Wool. And it is beautiful and white, and I'm not so sure that I would wear it next to skin. Cheviot is a bit of a down breed, and I'm not gonna say this is, it would definitely be an outerwear sweater, which is probably what it will become, maybe a cardigan or something. I could wear it on my neck. I don't think I actually would have a problem, but maybe a lot of people couldn't. So here she is. This is the second skein, and I'm actually almost on to finishing the next bobbin. The joy of spinning 2-ply Aran weight yarn is, man, does it crank. You can really crank out some yarn. So, and what was funny about this yarn is I had one done and I had the other one done, and it continued, it just bloomed and bloomed even after I had soaked it and dried it. Like I had dried it and then I swear it still bloomed. So anyway, Cheviot, absolutely gorgeous. I have one other spinning to show you. And that I did on one of my Magic Crafts, my Magic Craft Susie older wheel. This is some fiber that Linda and Cami gave me for my birthday. I think I showed it maybe in fiber form, but this is merino and angora, so rabbit. And look at that color. Beautifully dyed. This ended up being probably about a 2-ply sport, maybe a fingering. I spun it on my Nano 2. And it's so pretty. and it is so soft. I mean, merino, and then you add a little bunny in there, it's just gonna be pure heaven. So I did this one short forward. So drafting my fibers forward, whereas I did this long draw. So it's big and floofy, and this is a lot more compacted. Anyway, all things we talk about more over in the community. I love, and we also have our Q&As. We had our Q&A last week too. Anyway, if you're wanting more time in a community, check it out. Okay, let's talk about Fiber Club, because I have some videos from back inside the mill that are processing Targhee. So Targhee was the Fiber Club of the month, and I forgot my notes on Targhee, so I'm gonna pause for a sec. Okay, I'm gonna have to just read from my notes off of my computer because I thought I had a backup, but I don't. Okay, so Targhee, and I got this information from the Targhee Sheep Association, as we do, right? So Targhee this is how it came to be. They were first bred in the 1900s in Idaho by crossing Rambouillet fine wool with Lincoln and Corriedale so they crossed Rambouillet, Lincoln, and Corriedale, and then they bred it with that ewe with Rambouillet rams. So added back in some fine wool. And then when they got to this great creature, then they just bred like crazy. Then they bred immensely, I believe, with the Rambouillet. It was kind of a weird, like they came up with this and then they instantly reverted back and started breeding another way. If anybody has more precise details on that, I've kind of read a couple things and they're all just a little bit different. But the basis is the ewe was Rambouillet, Lincoln, Corriedale, bred to a Rambouillet ram. So they were looking for a sheep that would be hardy enough to be out on ranch land, and that would be dual purpose. So commercial for meat, which means that you need a fairly fast growing sheep, and fine wool. So they were trying to have a dual purpose sheep with fine wool. They succeeded. So now we've got Targhee, and the wool that I was working with came from Montana. I actually bought it online, which is not something I do very often because I don't get to get my hands in it before, and I know really well what my machinery is gonna process well and not process well, and that is every mill. We all get to know our machinery and what's gonna process amazingly well and what's gonna process less well. Fine wools, generally speaking, are always a bit of a extra. Anyway, I got the fleeces. They are giant. They're like 9 pounds of fleece, and they were fairly well skirted as far as the ooks was out. I did some more intense skirting to get, these are not coated because they're out on ranch land. They're not coated sheep. And the other, so there was, not horrible VM, but there was more VM. And there was a fair amount of second cuts. So the fleeces, when they came, I was like, oh man, have I got my work cut out for me? They weren't a mess, but they seemed a little tippy, like I could break the tips of the fiber off what was exposed most to the sun, but it actually went through my machine really well. So I did some adjustments to my machine, how I processed it, of course, but they processed fairly well. The biggest thing I had a challenge with was second cuts. And I do have, I have got some Targhee here. Don't worry, we'll do a comparison because I've got some other fine wool since I've been running through them. But here is a lock of Targhee. You can see, hopefully, that there is a very fine crimp in there. There you go. A very fine, that teeny tiny little crimp is in there. It's a very bouncy wool and a very poofy wool. Let me show you what I mean by second cuts in case you've never seen. But here you can see them beautifully. There were a fair amount to those. And I know why. It's because, when you're breeding for dual purpose, a lot of times, not that the wool isn't important, but also there's a lot of sheep and you have several shears and you need to get the wool off while the shears are there. So they can't be quite as, and also fine wools are more challenging to shear. So these are second cuts. And some of them were so tiny. Like those are pretty obvious. A lot of them were itsy bitsy. And the other thing is that because this wool has that teeny tiny crimp, you would think it was a second cut, and then sometimes it would pull out and be 3 inches long because it had just coiled back up on itself after washing. So it was a bit of a challenge in that way. So there are some neps in here, mainly second cuts, because it actually ran well. It ran well. I did everything when it was very, very damp and humid here. We had like 3 inches of rain one weekend, and I was like, get it through the picker. Now I will be at work picking. But I put it through the picker very carefully, but it made it. So I have videos showing you, but I'll kind of hold up and show you. Here we are. Here's our, and it's so fluffy and it's so white. And oh my gosh, I kept stopping as I was processing because I was a little worried about the neps. And a lot of them are so teeny tiny that as you're spinning, you don't really, they kind of even themselves out. Some of the bigger ones you did have to stop and pick. A lot of the VM dropped out that was left. So it didn't look as pretty as I love my roving to look, but when I spun it, every single time I sat down and spun it, and I spun a fair amount, I'm still spinning on my support spindle, and I spun it at the wheel, and I was like, it's all good. It's a very silky fiber to spin. It's lovely to spin. So before we go to some videos, let me just show you some other fine wools just so you can see what they look like in comparison as far as locks. We've got some merino, and I have one more. I have a Rommeldale here, and I'm processing some Rommeldale right now. Again, I'm processing lots of stuff, a little bit less right now because I've slowed down a bit, but my Patreon people and my Fiber Club people tend to be the first, and those on my newsletter. So again, get on my newsletter. Okay, so here is our Targhee. Hopefully you can see, yep. Here's our merino. Now the merino was coated, and this is washed, this is unwashed. So a little bit of difference there. But those baby crimps, you can see the Targhee is a little bit, I would say that it's a little bit less dense than the merino, which is not a bad thing when you're processing. The locks, there was some like separation of locks. They were still chunky, but not quite as dense. And then we have got our, this is some raw Rommeldale. And so you can see still that beautiful fine crimp, but definitely not in the same league as what we were looking at with these. And I know that the Targhee, all the fleeces I used were 23 micron. Beautiful, next to skin. Anyway, there's our three. So here's our Rommeldale. Here's our merino. The merino is the only washed one, to be fair. And here is our Targhee. I mean, Rommeldale is still my favorite, but Targhee, I could run a second on fine wools because it spins like a dream. So hopefully I'll have some on the website. Fiber Club, I think, has got what they want, and it'll make its way into the newsletter and be up on the website. So let's go ahead and go watch some videos on processing of this, and then I will come back and say my fond farewells. Okay, enjoy. Okay, you all, I am here at the skirting table, and I don't have my tripod, so I can't show you as I go through this, but this is a massive fleece. And let me see if I can get, and this is not all of it. I've already skirted some of it, and it's kind of like a, it's just a fleece. There's no rhyme or reason to how it's folded, and it's giant. I mean, it's probably 8 pounds or so. And so here's some of what I've skirted already. And this is Targhee, which is a new to me breed, which I'm sure I'll have said already. And so let me close in a little bit. And it's on the finer, these were all 23 micron fleeces that I got. So you can see there's some lovely crimp in there, but man, does it take some skirting to get through that. So I'm just because there's not a order to the fleece, basically, I'm just kind of taking sections at a time, giving them good shakes, because there's a lot of second cuts that aren't going to drop out as wonderfully as I might like. Yeah, so we're just going bit by bit. I'm just taking a chunk, clearing it out, tossing it in the good pile. I also have a second good pile that I kind of wash by itself to see how it's going to turn out, like the questionable. But that's how I'm tackling a fleece that this is this big and this disorganized. Yeah, there you go. So next we will go, look at that crimp though, isn't that beautiful? On to washing. All right, we are at the washer and I am doing some of the last of the Targhee. And I don't have my microphone because it's in my craft room. Darn it. But I'm washing up this Targhee and I'm going to show you. See how those ends are just a little bit cauted? So I know that that is not going to process well through my machinery. It's going to just turn into nets. So as I'm going along, when I'm washing, I'm still pulling stuff like that out. In this fleece, I also am pulling out, and that's another chunk, a fair amount of, so this is a finer wool, as we've probably discussed by now. And so I know I have to be very cautious about what fiber I choose to process because this fiber is more delicate. Fine equals more delicate, which means I've got to be kinder to it as it goes into my machines. And the other thing is this fleece has a fair amount of shortcuts. All of these fleeces do. And second cuts, I should say, shortcuts. They are shortcuts. They are second cuts. And because this is a finer wool, those second cuts aren't going to drop out like they would if I was processing a Romney or a Shetland. Most of those second cuts just happily drop out during processing along the way, especially at the carder level. But this wool is less prone to doing that because the fine wools just don't like to let go of stuff. So I'm having to, and I'll show you. I think you can see like, see that little dangler right there? Little tiny, they're all over this fleece. There are some big chunks and there are lots of tiny chunks, and then sometimes you can't tell whether it's shortcuts or, here's another chunk I'll show you in a sec that I'm going to pull out. So I'm just having to take my time with this wool. I am happy to report that while I can't get all of the second cuts out, the fiber is still, I mean, there are going to be some little pills from all those second cuts that I can't quite get every little one out. But in general, the fiber is carding up absolutely lovely. I was very worried, and I've spun a bit of it, and it is a dream to spin. So we're on the right track. I don't mind spending the time and energy as long as it puts out a product that I am happy with. And I'm not even... Okay, everyone, we are at the picker, and I've got pretty decent humidity still, so we're gonna pick some. Picking is always where the humidity is the game changer because it's just so much static can build up. And if it's like a fine wool or anything like that, it will just, everything will be a mess and it will tear. So I'm working on this Targhee, which you should be aware of because that's pretty much everything in this episode. And so I am opening it up pretty well so that I can pick any more VM I want to, and so I can see if there's any second cuts I can get. I'm running this really nice and thin. I'm going to turn it on since I actually have my microphone. So I'm running it pretty thin through the picker because I want the picker to be gentle to it and not get too bogged down with too much fiber. So I'm just gently going through. And this actually has like a million little second cuts in it. It's like minuscule, and it's really easy to miss because this fiber likes to, it's so springy and it's got such tiny little crimp to it that it's hard to tell the difference between a second cut and when the wool has just like sprung back on itself. So a lot of times I think, oh, that's a second cut, and then no, it's not. It's just the wool having sprung back on itself. So anyway, we're going through, we're being gentle, and we're going to make sure that the carder or the picker, what will happen is I can see it start to build up in the teeth in there. And I can also see when I go into around the corner here and look at inside where it's coming out, If it's at all staticking to the walls, it's just game over. We stop. And it can really hold things. Once I get it through here, I can condition it. And then for the most part, I can card. But if I can't get to the conditioning part, then we don't get very far. So anyway, I'm going to carry on with this and I'll show you what this looks like as it's coming out here. And then we'll move on to carding. Okay. All right, here we go. Whoop. With it. Sorry, I have it dark so that I keep my humidity and heat low. But here it comes, coming out the other side. And it's done quite well. I'm not getting anything stuck to the sides of the picker. And I think I'm kind of at the end, so there might not be any more popping through. But we'll pop in and see how it looks. All right, so I am just gonna come in and condition this now, because like I mentioned, it definitely needs conditioner this time of year. So I will just pull it out, and I kind of have a vague idea of how much wool there is and how much therefore I want to condition it as I'm going along. So there is a little bit of a madness. I actually, with this fiber, like to give it a good shake because there is a fair amount of VM, even as much as I'm picking. And so anything helps along the way. Kind of release some of that, and I'll keep picking while I'm at the carder. It's mostly these little, I'm guessing they're seeds of some sort that are a bit bigger, and I can actually hear them dropping out. So anyway, I'll show you real quick just how I condition, because obviously, and I do have on my blog, if you go over there, it's beingyouthful.com, there is a recipe for how to make your own conditioner at home. So I just give it a good spray, and then I like to just move it through. And depending on how much I have is just how much I use, but and I like to let it sit overnight for me, because you want the wool to absorb up that conditioner. Just like with our hair, you want to give it time. So all right, onward to the carder. Okay, everyone, we are at the carder, and you may notice that my surroundings, I'm coming, I promise, are a little bit dark, and that I'm wearing a tank top because it is randomly 80 degrees today. Oh, I think it was over 80 when I drove to the mill this afternoon. And I have the lights off because I am trying to, the humidity is still decent in here, and so I'm trying to keep it nice and low so that my fiber processes well. It is conditioned, so that does give me a lot more leeway, but I don't want to push it. I'm already pushing it with this fiber. So we know this is the Targhee, and you'll see I will be picking to the end in this. I think my people in Fiber Club, some of them got some of the early, like the first batches that I was processing, and there might have been a little more VM in there. And then my second batches, there might be a smidge more pilling, but all in all, I think this fiber is carding up well. It spins really lovely, even with the VM that's in it. So I have no problems there. I'm running it very lightly, I should say. So this is running at about 2.2 ounces per feed. And if you've been watching long enough, you know that I tend to run fibers when I'm in my happy place, like just processing Romney or something like that. I would be processing at about 3.5 ounces per feed. So this is literally a third. And that is so that just to give the carder an easier time of processing it, I'm opening it up well, more than I would be if I weren't talking to you all, but I am opening it up a fair amount and it's running very thin. Part of why I'm spending so much time opening it is because of the pilling. And if I can see the little, more the second cuts, if I can see them, and the VM, if I can see them when I open up the fiber, then I can yank them out before they get on the carder. And it's just these like itsy bitsy minuscule second cuts that are the main issue. I have another fleece to process. I haven't done it up yet. We'll see. That one may just actually be more pilling. And it's very hard to tell with these fleeces because they have such that tiny crimp that you think like, oh, that's a pill, and then it stretches out really far. So I don't have quite enough feed there, but we're gonna go ahead and start the machine and I'll let you see, whoops, walk right in front of you. You have to turn the machine on. So, and I wanted to show you something here. I need a little bit more on here. And it looks really pilly when it's running through the machine when it first starts. And then when it gets to the other side where it's ready to come off the carder, it's like significantly better. So that's nice. Because if you look at it from my angle right now, you're like, oh my gosh, this looks horrific. And I have found, I have spun this on my support spindle and I have been spinning it on a wheel here and there. Like I stopped to make sure, like, is this still processing as well as I would like it to? Is it still spinning well? Ultimately, that's all I care about, right? And it has been. So, all right, I'm gonna take you off the tripod here and whoop, I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about with the pilling. It looks a little, I don't know if you can see all those little kind of spots that look like pills in there. But then they can be stretched out. So as we get to the other side, I don't know if I'll be able to show you, but there's a lot less. Like it's just being parted out. So the fibers are getting stretched out. And then we'll come down here and we'll see it coming off. And it does look really lovely. There's a little bit of pilling. Mostly it's like the tiny, tiny pills that I have found that you can kind of just spin through. It's not that many that I have to actually stop and pick at. That's the VM. That's where the VM gets you. But there it is. All right, I'm gonna finish this up. Okay, I hope that was interesting. I am glad to be done with the Targhee, and I will be making a bit of a shift, although like I said, I am working on some Romeldale that I got when I was in Central Oregon. There was a little fiber festival over there that I went to, and a lot of the people I buy wool from were there in one spot. So I went and bought a fair amount of wool, and Romeldale I just love. So I am hand picking this current batch of Romeldale. So it's taking a little bit longer to get onto the carder, but that's okay. I'm learning to slow down and enjoy that process a bit more as well. So, okay, I think that's all I have for you all. I just kind of wanted to pop in, share some mill videos so that you could stay in the loop of what's going on there, show you what I'm working on. I would love to hear from you. I have missed the interaction of comments and things like that. If you want some more interaction and community, like I said, check out my Patreon. Everything's in the show notes, whether you're listening or watching. And I will see you all in a couple weeks, if not on Patreon, or maybe on an Audible podcast. Okay, until next time, stay healthy, be kind to everybody around you, and continue making the endless amount of pretty things because the world needs them. Okay, thank you. See you soon.